remember, people during end of life are disempowered because, oftentimes when people age, they lose their self-respect and their dignity because they start to associate themselves with the disease instead of remembering the person that they are.
Right.
So this whole life review process separates themselves and they can regain their self-worth. So we're empowering the patient. So we do that by asking, you choose who you want to share your legacy with after death.
This is the Heart of Hospice podcast with Helen Bauer. Maggie Gannon, the co-founder of Haven, is my guest today to talk about how Haven is helping people to rediscover their pasts and record their meaningful life story moments. Whether you're a family caregiver or an end-of-life professional, the Heart of Hospice podcast is here to enhance your hospice experience by connecting you with information you can use about end-of-life care.
This episode is sponsored by Hospice Navigation Services. When end-of-life care becomes confusing or overwhelming, Hospice Navigation Services can help. Hospice navigators are hospice professionals with at least 10 years of hospice experience, trained to provide accurate, unbiased information. Hospice Navigation Services, the guide for your journey. Now, here's today's episode.
My guest today is Maggie Gannon. She is the co-founder of Haven. And I think what I like best about Maggie is she's a nurse. But she's also starting a business, and she's come up with a fantastic website and service. Maggie's aim through Haven is to eliminate suffering from the end-of-life equation, restoring everyone's basic right to die as well as they lived. Maggie's a board-certified adult gerontology clinical nurse specialist and the CEO, co-founder of Haven. She worked caring for head and neck cancer patients for over 25 years and saw a lot of patients suffering needlessly during end of life. As a result of that, Maggie was inspired to create a better dying experience where suffering is never an option. She combined legacy therapy with technology to help those with chronic and terminal illness maintain or renew a sense of self-worth, living with purpose as they navigate life's last chapter. Haven, her service, is the first customer-centric company built from clinical research to help the person, the family, and the companies that serve them improve quality of life during the patient's last chapter. In that way, they're changing the feared experience of death, which is a very natural part of life, into something more meaningful and peaceful when the time comes. Maggie's got some great stories to tell about the work that Haven's doing. We had an awesome discussion on storytelling and why leaving a legacy of story is so important and how Haven is helping people to do that. So here's my conversation with Maggie Gannon of Haven. Maggie, welcome to the Heart of Hospice podcast. It's so great to see you today.
Thanks, Helen. It's a pleasure to be here.
I wish everybody could see the mural that you have on your wall. You and I have talked about this a couple of times. It's the most beautiful watercolor, looks like vines with flowers on it. It's just gorgeous.
Thank you.
We're going to start with an icebreaker question. We haven't talked about this previously, so you get to just come up with whatever comes to your mind, and we'll just see where it goes. If you could have any person over for dinner, somebody who's already died, somebody who's passed away, who would you pick and why?
Wow. That's a good question.
That's a big question, right?
Yeah. I would choose my grandpa Beckman. And the reason I would choose him is because he was my father figure, and I still feel connected to him today. I wouldn't be the person I am today without having him built into me. And losing him was one of the hardest things in my life. But man, I was sure lucky to have him as a grandfather.
Oh, that's nice. What a nice tribute. He would probably love that you said that today.
Thank you. My heart feels warm right now. So.
Oh, well, that's the best way to start a podcast. So We're going to be talking about legacies and stories today because that's what your organization does. That's what Haven's services are all about. Tell our listeners how you got interested in helping people preserve their legacies and how Haven helps with that.
Okay, well, I guess a couple reasons behind why I started Haven. Professionally, I'm an adult gerontology clinical nurse specialist, and I've taken care of head and neck cancer patients for over 25 years, and I witnessed countless patients suffer during end of life. One of the reasons I felt that they suffered was because nobody listened to their story before they died. Like, we did things for them. We would listen to, their 5 wishes, or they would choose the power of attorney. But telling one story is very, very powerful, and it's a way for them to feel valued, to restore their dignity, through life's last chapter. So that was the professional impetus behind Haven. And after witnessing all these patients, it got really real for me personally when my husband was diagnosed with leukemia. And that was really the linchpin behind everything, because, when it happened so abruptly and it was like getting hit with a bag of bricks, all I kept thinking about is, if he was going to die, what did we have to remember him by? Because it just happened so quickly. Like, how is he going to tell his story? How was I going to preserve his story for later? And it really, I knew I had to do something, because that story piece is so powerful. And it's a way for people to gain peace and serenity instead of suffering. And, nobody should suffer during end of life. It shouldn't even be an option.
Right. So the stories that Haven helps to preserve and to memorialize, why do you think it's so important for people to tell those stories? We want to tell our stories, but why is that so meaningful for people? Why do you think it's so important?
Well, I'm reminded of that commercial about cotton, the look and feel of cotton, the fabric of our lives.
Yeah.
And really, that's what our story is. Our legacy is the fabric of our lives. That story piece, we've been telling stories forever, and it helps somebody not only find meaning and value in the life that they've lived and the life that they're going to continue to live, but it's also like a way to share one's experiences with the rest of the world, so they can make informed decisions about how they want to live their life. And, and his stories can be so colorful, and they can be about a life lesson, or they can just be about a memory of sitting in the sun with your best friend, right? Or, the moment you met your spouse, your first date, your first kiss. There's so many different types of stories of sorrow. It encompasses being human, that story element.
Having those stories pass from generation to generation, before all the technology and the written word and, formal access to education and books and things like that, that's exactly how we passed on those stories. And I remember, I have 2 daughters, and I remember them sitting with my mom, who had a tendency apparently to be a very naughty child, and sharing some of these stories about things she did to her sister. Winding a comb up in her hair all the way to the scalp to where it wouldn't come out, because my aunt had curly hair. And my kids were just enthralled with this story of their grandmother as a naughty little girl getting into trouble. Granted, hopefully that's not a life lesson that my kids needed, but, to have that, part of my mom's legacy will be that she was funny and she told these stories, and the time that she invested while telling them to my kids and to the rest of us, I think that itself was an investment in who we are as a family from generation to generation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a lot of power. There's a lot of power in storytelling. In hospice, we call it life review.
Yes.
So Haven has basically has created a place for us to do our life review to where we can share it and perpetualize it, if that's a word, perpetualize. But Haven provides that place. Obviously, the stories and the legacies, the photos and the videos, things like that that get posted and put into Haven's website, it's impactful for families, right? We know it's important for us to be able to tell our own stories, but why is it so meaningful for families and loved ones to be able to have those stories and photos?
Because it's a way for them to stay connected to the person that they love after death. It's tangible. You can, going back to read somebody's words that they wrote to you, it's so healing. And, it's a way for people to reach beyond, the grave or the other side to still, build into the people that they love and to help them through good times and bad times. Right. So somebody's story to their grandchildren could be, you know what? I lived through the Depression and, this is what I did to survive. And, that fills someone with not only, pride and honor about the person that lived through that hard time, but it informs their life about, well, what am I going to do if I'm going through this? What would Grandpa Beckman have done?
Right.
To have that story. Oh, it's so powerful. And I still have, I have letters. I lost my best friend when I was 25 and she used to send me letters in the mail. And because we lived apart, we lived in different sides of the state. And during the summer, she would send letters back and forth. And I found those letters about a month ago. And I started to read them, and I was overcome with emotion. There were tears of happiness, sadness, and it just triggered so many memories. It was this reliving these special moments together.
And letter writing is a lost art these days in the digital technology era. But Haven's digital format helps people. Basically, that's your letter writing. You can put that up there.
That's right. And you can actually, with the platform, people can not only do the life writing and write their story, but they can write legacy letters, send them to whoever they choose. They can send them to a group of people. Like if somebody has, a bunch of children, they can send everybody one letter or they can send separate letters. And that is so powerful because it provides one with the opportunity to say things that have never been said before, or restate things that have been said because they're so important. And man, what a way for closure and healing. I'm really sorry about this. I probably could have done this better. And it's so meaningful for the recipient to open that up and to get that closure after somebody's not there anymore. So with the website, users can send these letters now, or they can send the letter after they die.
So what's the process someone would go through? What do they need to do to connect with Haven and start sharing their stories? An individual.
Oh, any individual who, would like to create their legacy can just go to the website, and that's hvnlegacy.com, and they can sign up. And please, scroll through the landing page, and it tells you the steps to take. I created the website from a gerontology perspective, and I made it as simple and as easy as I could so people aren't going to become overwhelmed with technology as they're creating their legacy. And that's how they do it. They have a username and password and they create their site.
Interesting. So Haven doesn't just work with individuals. You guys have some specialized services as well for working with hospice and palliative care teams and then working with end-of-life doulas. Tell us how you're partnering with hospice and palliative agencies.
Well, because of, working within the field of head and neck cancer patients and witnessing people suffer, and then walking through that journey with my husband, I realized that something had to be done with, the way we deal with end of life. And I felt powerless as a provider taking care of patients because I felt that we lacked quality of life interventions. And the quality of life interventions that we do have are underused because in general, people are still, preoccupied with how to, maintain life, to keep people alive instead of, let's just make people as comfortable as we possibly can. I mean, we're definitely making progress, but we have ways to go. So thinking, taking on the attitudes of a clinical nurse specialist, I looked for evidence-based science and to find the answer. And luckily, national palliative care and hospice organizations already identified that legacy and dignity therapy it's a very brief intervention that increases quality of life. So essentially, I took the underpinnings of legacy and dignity therapy and I integrated that into the platform, into the foundational platform. So, how we work with palliative care and hospice is that we provide a quality of life intervention that involves, of course, legacy preservation, utilizing dignity and legacy therapy methodologies. And then the second way we partner with palliative care and hospice is our business also serves as a way for palliative care and hospices to actually track metrics so they can show, accreditation agencies that they're increasing their patient experience and quality of life. And it's also a way that we can help these organizations generate revenue. And that's something that's really needed across the healthcare system right now, because as you know, people are getting older, they're living longer, people with chronic illness, it's increasing, like it's skyrocketing. And that's a huge strain and stress on the healthcare system. And, it's so difficult for them to find a way to fund the care that's needed and to generate revenue to sustain end of life care.
Absolutely. So when an agency partners or when an individual goes in and signs up and begins to utilize Haven, can they upload documents and photos? What kind of things can they put into the system there?
So that's a good question. We have it's very robust. Our legacy platform is. So we use different modalities. We use storytelling, and we have a life review section. So clients can choose different categories to write about. So the care team kind of, they do the life review and they say, here's the categories. And then that gets that conversation starting. So they're creating their life story. The other legacy interventions are uploading a photo, so there's unlimited space for photos. They also have a choice to decide who they want to share their legacy with after they die. So remember, people during end of life are disempowered because, oftentimes when people age, they lose their self-respect and their dignity because they start to associate themselves with the disease instead of remembering the person that they are.
Right.
So this whole life review process separates themselves and they can regain their self-worth. So we're empowering the patient. So we do that by asking, you choose who you want to share your legacy with after death.
Right.
You choose a charity to donate to in your memory.
So Maggie, is Haven secure for people that are, uploading photos and personal letters and things like that? What kind of security does Haven provide?
Haven has a very fortified security wall and everything is password protected.
Okay, so Haven doesn't just stop at individuals, and then they don't just stop working with hospice and palliative care teams. You guys also have a separate section for end-of-life doulas, which is a huge movement across the United States these days. And thank goodness for them. They are amazing people doing very intense, amazing, valuable work. So Haven also has a section to partner with them. How do you guys partner with end-of-life doulas?
Well, you brought up some good points about doulas. They are a very, very rapidly evolving profession. And thank goodness, because they're filling that gap right now. Because, in the healthcare system, we're short-staffed. I think
True.
This year alone, we're short-staffed 1 million nurses across the United States. So doulas, thank goodness, have this specialized training and this sensitivity to actually, create this compassionate space for people that's needed when they're dying. And with our platform, we're giving them a platform that's rooted in evidence-based science, so they can really and firmly and squarely take the seat with the medical profession, because they're using something that the medical profession would use. It's evidence-based science. And again, we're providing them with an end-of-life software solution so they can grow and market their business, and they can also, track what all their clients are doing, because they have their own unique dashboard that reflects their private practice.
That's interesting. End-of-life doulas, a lot of them work independently, but hospice teams have begun to incorporate end-of-life doulas into the interdisciplinary team because they bring not just added manpower, which of course we always need, have for years. It's gotten much worse during the pandemic, but they also bring a perspective of companioning that is different. I think it's unique to hospice. They're bringing in meaning making and legacy creation, which is right up Haven's alley, and the rituals that really enrich the end-of-life experience that, let's face it, hospice professionals don't always have the time or the imagination sometimes to be able to offer to patients and families.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I love it that Haven is providing that.
Navigating end-of-life care can be confusing and overwhelming. Hospice Navigation Services can help you navigate hospice care for the best end-of-life experience possible. Hospice navigators are hospice professionals with at least 10 years of hospice experience, trained to provide accurate, unbiased information. Our team's compassion and respect for quality of life allows them to help you focus on getting the kind of care you want. When you need in-depth information about hospice, a Level 1 navigation session can provide information on what hospice care includes, roles of the team members, and how to choose a hospice agency. A Level 2 session is the best choice if you want to include multiple members of your family or caregiving village, and includes an explanation of hospice costs and coverage. If you have specific questions about a current hospice experience, a question and answer session with a hospice navigator can give you the answers you need. Watch for the launch of the Hospice Navigation Services in January 2023. Hospice Navigation Services, the guide for your journey.
Let's talk about the resources that Haven has available, because you guys have a big list of resources on your website. Can you hit the highlights of that? Because there's a lot.
We do. We have a wide variety of resources within the end-of-life ecosystem. So anybody who, wants to plan for their end of life, they can hit that resource section and they can find a funeral pre-planner.
Oh.
They can find a senior real estate agent, if they're interested in downloading. There's end-of-life doulas who are affiliates of the platform, so they can find actually, and even if they're not ill, you don't have to be ill to use this or sick to use this website. Just planning ahead, to prospectively plan ahead, it really, really, really helps with everything. It makes people feel like they have closure, and they really, and it takes that pressure and burden off of them. So having, wanting to downsize is important.
Near and dear to my heart, of course, you've got podcasts on there.
Podcast, yeah.
And you've got some books listed as well, books for end of life.
Yes.
For those who are readers and enjoy that kind of thing. Another thing that you have, which is something we haven't really touched on the podcast before, is you have a resource for professional obituary writing. Because let's dive into that a little bit. Obituaries are hard to write. They are hard to write. Either you got one paragraph or you have 8 pages. And I think it's difficult, especially if you're, like you're saying, you haven't been proactive about it, or maybe you as the person who's been ill have not provided that kind of thing. Some people like to write their own obituaries. And it takes a burden off the family if that happens. But most obituaries are written, and I don't have any science to back this, but this has been my experience and my professional guess, is that most obituaries are written when that grief is at its highest right after the person dies or when they are actively dying. I've seen that happen as well. So a professional to write an obituary, that's an awesome resource. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Thank you. It's one of my favorite resources on the platform. We have our obituary writer is named Heidi Connolly, and she's absolutely wonderful. She actually, you can sign up on our website to take a class with Heidi if you would like to write your own obituary. And believe it or not, a lot of the data that I have supports that women in their 50s and 60s, it's like writing your obituary is like the new scrapbooking. And most females are really into this. So they can sign up and take a class with Heidi, a life writing class or an obituary writing class. And she will, help and give them pointers, on how to start the process. But, for people who like the idea of having a personalized obituary, they can contract through Heidi, and she gives them a very personable interview and really pulls out, those special parts that they would like to be remembered by. And she's just a wonderful writer.
Yeah, it looks like she'll do the obituary writing workshop, and they do it over Zoom. So it's not like you have to be in person to do that. And it's $75 for the class. So I love it. She said it's not like sweating over that 10-page essay you had to do in high school.
Right. And, we actually, here in Denver, I'm located in Denver. I've worked with Heidi at senior living facilities. And we've actually done a class where we Zoomed Heidi in, and it was really fun. So she engaged a group of seniors, and it was very interesting to see the room transform. Like, people are not exactly sure, and then suddenly they're excited about it. You're like, this is really fun, because again, it's just like with the legacy writing, people are reminded of who they are and the value that they've brought to their life, either on a professional level or with those that they love personally.
It's really just another way of storytelling.
Yes.
For a legacy. I like that. I've never really thought about an obituary that you write up as a legacy project. I've always thought about it as more of it's an announcement, right? That the person has.
Could be.
Yeah.
I mean, think about when people read newspapers like 20 years ago,
right.
They paid a lot of money in the paper for, 3 or 4 lines. It was just so generic. They were born, they lived, here's their family, and they died.
Right.
And how insensitive was that? I think back about my grandparents, and man, I wish that they had an opportunity to write their story down, even like bits and pieces of their story, like you were sharing about your mom or her grandma, and then, rolling your hair up and getting it knotted up in the brush. Those are heartwarming stories, and I don't have those. So this whole notion that, an obituary is just to be for information, it doesn't have to be about that now. It doesn't, if you wanted it to be a big story and we'd publish it out in the New York Times, it would cost thousands and thousands of dollars. And that's the beauty of this digital technology, and especially with Haven, is you can write your story. You have unlimited space, and it costs $49.99, and you have a permanent site for you now to appreciate who you are, and then for your loved ones to stay connected to you after death with this story that you wrote. So it could be a 10-pager, or it could be a 1 paragraph. Again, it's totally up to the person.
Right, depending on how much they want to share.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so $49.95. Users can sign up, purchase their subscription. Is that a one-time fee, or is there an ongoing fee for the stories and the photographs to stay on the site?
Currently, at the present moment, it's a one-time fee. So they pay it, you're done. And, 20 years from now, when you die, it's still going to be there for your friends and families afterwards, after you die.
You can keep adding to it and changing it, can't you?
Yeah, it almost can become like a diary. Like, oh, we took a trip to the Bahamas this year.
Right. I had a new grandbaby born.
Right.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So how can our listeners connect with the services that Haven is providing?
So if somebody is interested in creating their legacy, they can go to hvnlegacy.com and sign up. If anybody's interested who works in the end of life care field, a doula or palliative care hospice, you can also contact me at Maggie. So Maggie at hvnlegacy.com. Or go to the website and then you can, where it says contact, just click on the link and you can also send me an email. And then the next step would be is we would get in touch and then I could give you a demo of how that works and how it would fit into your specific organization to help improve patient experience, quality of life, and things like that.
Awesome. I'll have links in our show notes to the website, and I'll have Maggie's email so you can get in touch with her. Maggie, thanks so much for taking time to share with my listeners about the services that Haven's providing.
You're welcome, Helen. And I really appreciate having me on. It's a pleasure and a privilege. It just means a lot to me. So thank you. I'm very grateful.
So you see why the work that Haven is doing is so awesome. Storytelling, it's at the foundations of what we do in hospice. We call it life review. You can call it dignity therapy, whatever the term happens to be. But it's all about leaving legacy, creating meaning for family and friends, people you care about. And Haven services allow people to do that. Being able to upload and save written documents and photos, which of course is my favorite part, but being able to tell those stories, the individual letters that you can write. You can choose, actually, Maggie told me off recording, you can choose whether to have the letters released to the recipients right then. You can release to a group, or you can choose to have the letters released after your death. It helps to keep connection going to the people that you love. It informs your family about how you lived, how you survived during difficult times, and it shares all those stories. You can even share recipes and memorabilia, your grandmother's punch bowl that she used at Christmas, that kind of thing. So it's very personalized. And what we know about legacy and dignity therapy is it improves quality of life. Hospice has been doing this for years, but the clincher behind what Haven is doing. Haven can help an agency track the metrics of patients' quality of life, which is so important when you look at hospice care, palliative care. I love the way she's partnering with end-of-life doulas. There's a specialized dashboard for end-of-life doulas. It can be branded, and it has all these different areas that an end-of-life doula can help a patient utilize, or a patient can utilize it on their own. Another great feature of Haven is obituary writing. And let's face it, obituaries are really hard. Either you have to figure out how to compress somebody's life and existence into 5 sentences, a small paragraph, or you have the 10-page essay that makes you have test anxiety and you're wondering if you're even including everything. So obituary writing, when you layer it with the grief and roll it all up into those tasks that end up being that nasty ball of after-death busyness, obituary writing is a task. It's really a job. But there are people who do it as a hobby and people who do it professionally, and that is one of the resources that Haven offers, is access to a professional obituary writer. She even has a workshop that people can attend for just $75, and it's remote. So it's a great way to learn to write an obituary and to practice that if you want to write one for somebody you care about. Takes the burden off the family of trying to figure out how to write that. So Haven's got a lot of fantastic resources. I would suggest that you connect in with them. I'll have links to everything in the show notes, but Haven's website is hvnlegacy.com. N as in Nancy, legacy.com. You'll be able to connect with Maggie there as well. Check out all the different ways someone can use Haven. Be sure to catch the next episode of the Heart of Hospice podcast. You can find more episodes on theheartofhospice.com, and don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. You can connect with the Heart of Hospice on Facebook and Instagram, and send me your questions or comments by email to helen@theheartofhospice.com. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.